Ну что ж, дамы и господа, мы готовы начинать прямо сейчас. Давайте поаплодируем максимально громко, как это только возможно. С огромным удовольствием хочется передать микрофон сопредседателю Совета Ассоциации волонтерских центров. Встречаем Артем Метелев прямо сейчас.
Well, it is my pleasure to give the floor to Mr. Artyom Metelev. Good morning to everyone. We are having a real festival. We had a disco till 2 a.m. last night, so which explains why we're a little bit late. My apologies for that. We are going to start our panel discussion. Maybe we'll have some time and finish it a little bit late. It is my pleasure to welcome all of you at the Civil Society platform. It's going to be devoted to volunteering and other forms of civil activity and the role of an individual in developing the world of a future. We are going to speak about being indifferent, and more specifically about various forms of volunteerings, corporate volunteering. We will discuss inclusive volunteering in various halls. Here in this room, we will be talking about the issue itself. I would like to invite our panelists now. Please give a round of applause to Jennifer Stepper, Communication Director for the UN Program for Volunteering. Good morning, Jennifer. Please take your seat. Abdulrahman Ayman, President of the renowned organization ISIC. I believe many of you, or at least some of you, participated in the volunteer internship in various countries. Tatiana Gabzikova, head of the Associations of Volunteering Centers. Tatiana, please take your seat over here on the panel. Mr. Pavel Savchuk, head of the public movement Volunteers from Medicine, and Ole Christian Medicine, Make the Difference Denmark president, head analyst, representative of the International Association IAVI in Denmark. We have a very interesting panel today. These are people engaged in volunteering and have been doing this for a long time now, for many years. They represent various countries. We would like our format to be the following. Half of the time will be given to our panelists who will be speaking about their practices, technologies. I will be asking them questions, and then the floor is going to be yours. Please get ready with your questions. I hope that the questions will be quite practical, specific, for you to be able to make use of the experience of our foreign guests, of our panelists, and learn certain lessons from their experience. For those who are from Russian, simultaneous interpretation is provided. You can take translation kits in the far right corner in case you need the headsets. And I would like our co-moderator to translate it.
In English, that's why our headsets will be useful for you. So you can take it in the left corner of this hall. And we are going to continue.
Thank you very much. And please do remember that in all major rooms, simultaneous interpretation is going to be provided. So if you attend our discussions, make sure that you have translation kits before the session starts. The translation is provided into 6 official languages of the United Nations. The simultaneous interpretation is going to be provided once again. My name is Mr. Metrev. I'm a co-chair of the volunteering centers. I'm going to moderate today's discussion, helping our panelists to speak about the most important things in this area. I would like to start with Mr. Abdulrahman Ayman. Good morning to you. Well, 68 years of ISIC experience, a renowned organization that you represent. You have been implementing programs in various countries, internships. You help our young people to develop professionally. In your view, AIESEC is also about volunteering in a way. A friend of mine visited Mauritius. He is a volunteer here. He participated in an internship devoted to the protection of women's rights. It was very interesting for him. Well, in essence, the programs you are implementing are about volunteering. In your view, is volunteering a characteristic of country of lower well-being in poorer countries with social problems? Is it developing them more rapidly, or the other way around? Is volunteering a characteristic of a well-developed country, a signal that countries have a high income? Because some sociologists say that people with high income feel more responsibility and therefore are more willing to participate. So what's your take on that? And could you please say a few words about what your organization is doing?
So we're just waiting for the clicker, and then we're going to start. Awesome. So good morning. How are you guys doing? Are you guys doing good? Are you guys doing good? Yep. So I know it's a little bit early, so just to get a little bit energized. So we're going to be talking about volunteering, and I'm going to explain what AIESEC is and all these beautiful things. First of all, my name is Abdu, just to keep it short and more simple for you guys, because I can understand that for some people this can be difficult to say. So just to explain a little bit of what I want to tell you guys today about volunteering. So we're going to do a very, very small exercise. I would like you to take out your phones, mobile phone. Take out your mobile phone. We're going to do something very, very simple. Unlock your mobile phone. Probably it's locked, so just unlock it. Unlock the phone, yes. Open your favorite social media channel, whether it's WhatsApp, VK, the thing that you use the most. And now I have one very simple challenge for you. I would like you to take your phone and pass it to the person sitting beside you. Is that possible? If there's no one beside you, then pass it maybe behind you or in front of you, to anyone around you. How did that feel like? How did that feel? Did it feel strange? Yeah? Same social media for some people. Some people would be like, why am I doing that? Especially if there are any kind of, thank you. If there are any kind of officials in the room, usually what would happen is very like top secret stuff. Oh my God, no, I'm not going to do that. So this is what happened back in 1948, and I'm going to let this video explain a little bit.
Every generation has the chance to shape the world, but the challenges faced today are more complex than ever before. And yet everywhere, education systems are leaving young people unprepared to deal with the pace of economic, social, and technological change. The world is defined by the people who live in it, so we believe the solution is to develop responsible and entrepreneurial young leaders today who will choose how the world will be led tomorrow. Unlike anyone else, we do this by providing practical leadership experiences to tens of thousands of young people all over the world. Since 1948, we've created challenging environments where young people can connect to the world, have the confidence to learn, and have the freedom to fail, where they can discover what really matters to them and realize their potential for the future. We give young people a chance to see the world, because if you see it, then you can start to understand it. And if you understand it, then you can start to change it. That's why we've committed to provide life-changing leadership experiences to 1 million young people in the next 3 years. Because when we add all those leadership stories together, we'll see a truly remarkable impact on the world. History has shown us what just one great leader can do. So imagine what 1 million great leaders could do. This is why we do what we do. But it's your world too. So how will you shape it?
So, yeah, thanks. So very, very simply, that's what we do. What we're trying to do is that we're trying to develop that human capital of trust. How can, at that point in time in 1948, when those 7 people that were trying to found AIESEC came together, they were thinking of one key thing. Post the Second World War, the world was in a lot of divide. And at that point in time, something such as cross-cultural understanding was something that was very difficult for people to be able to grasp, because that human capital of trust was at an extreme low. So imagine now when I'm asking you just to pass a simple phone that has a social media channel on it, you feel a little bit hesitant. At that point in time, the fact that you would be in a room such as this room, together from all these different countries, would have been something that is impossible. And that tells me that as a generation from that point on, we did a good job. We came a very, very long way from what was happening at that point to where we are now. And rooting from that core belief, as an organization, we believe that leadership is the fundamental solution. And leadership in youth is the fundamental solution to be able to create a better today for a better tomorrow. And we've been doing that since 1948 until this point in time. So more than 1 million young people throughout these past 70 years got the opportunity to go through an ISEC experience and develop these leadership qualities through volunteering and challenging experiences. But a lot of times we hear people speak on behalf of young people, and that happens very, very frequently. And even though we're young people, we did not take that for granted. We were like, okay, if we want to say something about young people, we need to ask them first. We need to take that permission so we'd be able to speak on behalf or speak as a voice of. And for that, around 2 years ago, we launched a survey, and it was called Youth Speak Survey. And we asked young people a couple of questions that are related to volunteering, what are social issues that they're interested in, and what really makes them tick. And 160,000 young people filled that survey, and you can see the demographic up on the screen. And one of our first questions was very, very simple. If you didn't need to think about money, no money, like it's not really a problem. You can choose whatever path you want in life, and you have all the money in the world. These are the 4 things that young people said. They said, we want to travel, we want to teach, we want to build, and we want to help. And I'll capitalize on these last 2, build and help, because we followed up that question, and we asked another question. Are you a volunteer? Super simple, yes, no question. And answering the question that you asked me earlier, as you can see, the demographic is very well distributed across the whole world. It doesn't matter if you're from a developing country or a developed country or a developing society or a society where poverty is taking over or a society where depression is the key social issue. More than 56% of young people around the world believe in volunteering. And that's, from my perspective, is what means mainstreaming volunteering. Volunteering is becoming the new definition of cool. And that's why I started my talk with that in the beginning. Volunteering is something that is currently being considered as a fundament for a young person to feel that they're creating a change, that they're making a contribution. And if you're not volunteering, usually you're thinking about volunteering, or you know someone that is volunteering, or maybe you did it even for 5 minutes of your life in some form. But a lot of statistics is very, very nice. And a lot of this information about the organization, ISEC, what we do, is also very, very nice. But what I wanted to cap on this message with is something that's a little bit more important than that. Because from my perspective, it's very nice to come here and talk statistics and talk facts, etc. And we can stay in a lecture format for the rest of the day. But this is what I really wanted to talk about. Last year in itself, almost 100,000 young people took on an opportunity to volunteer, whether as a member or as a global volunteer, meaning volunteering in another country, working on a social issue that you're passionate about. And this framework currently exists all around the world, and it was launched back in 2015. And it kind of gives us the guideline, telling us, these are the goals of the world. This is what we need to do in order to make this world a better place, so as a generation we'd be able to see tomorrow. Because if you take it for granted, and if you think just because we're young, we're in our 20s, who here is in their 20s, early 20s? If you're in your 20s, raise your hand, please. If you're 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. If you think that tomorrow is guaranteed, I promise you it is not. When you look at issues such as climate change, such as gender inequality, such as poverty, such as hunger, tomorrow is definitely not guaranteed. And if we do not work for it as a generation, we will all suffer because of this simple action. So I'm not here to preach, and I'm not here to talk to you guys about statistics. I'm here to talk to you that as a young generation, it's time for us to take a step, take a stand, and instead of being looked at as a target audience, as a thematic problem, and a lot of case studies, if we want to create change, then my question for you is, what are you doing about it? And it's as simple as that. Thank you very much. That's it. Yeah, that's it. I hope that answers your question.
Спасибо огромное. У вас потрясающее было выступление и контент.
Interesting presentation indeed. I think we will make use of your presentation if you don't mind. Maybe we'll translate it into English. Jennifer, now over to you. You represent the United Nations Volunteers Program. You are an official partner of the 19th World Festival of Youth and Students and the volunteering program of our festival here in Sochi. Almost on a daily basis, 3 days out of 5, 34 leaders of UN Volunteers Program from various states are talking about their impressions, about what they do in various humanitarian missions all over the world. Some people are active in post-war conditions, some are teaching women in African countries, some are helping the poor. Why are all these people doing this from your point of view? You have an organization that develops these efforts all over the world. You are active in more than 80 countries, if I'm not mistaken. From Russia, you have only 16 volunteers, as I remember, or 13, something around this figure. Why? Why is that so? Are people reluctant to participate in international missions, or the other way around, they are willing to do that in other states? Why are they doing that? And why, from your point of view, are they doing that? What can such missions give to such people? The audience here are all volunteers, leaders of various volunteering organizations from all over the country. Most of them know a foreign language, and potentially they could be interested in joining your efforts. So once again, why do such international programs exist? Could you say about this a few words, please?
Thank you. I don't need the translation for myself, so I'll take that off. Why? That's an interesting question. First of all, a lot of the why was just explained, and I think that that's a really, really powerful presentation, and thank you very much for that. It's really interesting because a lot of things that were just displayed and were talked about in an inspiring way are very much also the basis of what United Nations Volunteers is about. So first, I just explained very shortly what the United Nations Volunteers is, because I think it's important just to understand the basics. Many of you, if not most of you, are involved in some shape or form with a volunteer association, an organization in your country. This is replicated at United Nations Volunteers at a global level. So what we are doing is we are mobilizing volunteers. We have over 6,000 in the field, and we also have online volunteering. So we have online volunteering where over 12,000 assignments are happening as we speak, and people are volunteering all over the world with basically in their homes at, clicking the mouse. And some of those volunteers, mostly the ones that are in the field, are here at our stand this week, and they're really sharing the real inspiring stories. So I really encourage you all to not only, learn more about UNV, but really take some time. Today at 3 p.m., there'll be another talk with volunteers, and also on Friday. So, but the unique thing about the United Nations Volunteers Program is that the assignments in the field are always with United Nations programs. So we are making a bridge between volunteers and the United Nations. And this is so important. And as we just saw, we have the goals. We have we have the Sustainable Development Goals. We are all in this together. And so to make that bridge is essential to get young people, to get people that aren't so young, to get people with very expertise skill sets, to get people that are truly inspired to make a difference, that might not actually have a specific skill set, but have a real passion to be out there and to have that global interaction. So that's what we do. We also have a program for national UN volunteers.
Кроме того, у нас есть национальная программа волонтеров.
In what we call the Agenda 2030, because we have, in the United Nations and in development in the last 50 years, there was a bit of a stagnation, and suddenly people realized that, development isn't about experts or people going into the field to explain to others how they can have a better future. It has to be about people living in communities, people that know you are the experts. You are the experts about your country. You are the experts about your community. And so we have programs that are also UN volunteers at the national level, and working very closely with AVC and working with the Russian government, we hope to actually build that also here in Russia so that we can have more people involved in what is going on in the country. But you asked why. Volunteerism is universal. There is a word for volunteerism in every single language in the world. There are so many people that volunteer and they don't even know they're doing it. This is my first time in Russia and to this beautiful and very vast country. And when I first come to a country, what I like to do is two things. I like to go to the supermarket because I like to see what people eat. And I like to just put on the television, even though I don't understand, and look at daily TV, soap operas. Because you really get an idea of what the culture is like just by looking at the image of those that maybe 5 minutes. And what I saw when I turned on the television here in Sochi is that there was a group of people, and they were neighbors, and they were having a conversation, and they were helping each other. And I don't know exactly what they were doing, but somebody needed help, and they were providing it. And so there is this innateness in us all, and we have to remember that. So volunteerism is universal. What perhaps the barrier might be here, and why there are only 16 very courageous UN volunteers from Russia, but there will be more because that barrier is being broken down. The barrier is really access and awareness. And just by listening to the UN volunteers during this week, just getting to know what UN volunteers is, we have also a very close collaboration with the Association for Volunteer Centers. We have International Volunteer Day that we celebrate every year globally all over the world, also with ISEC, with many, many partners. And this is also an opportunity to get to know about not just UN volunteer opportunities, but other international volunteer opportunities. And I think that I want to say thank you very much, because you're doing a great job in breaking down those barriers. And I'm really confident that there will not be that question why next year this time. So thank you.
Спасибо огромное.
Thank you very much. So, actually, every day at 3 p.m., you can volunteer yourselves to various programs. If you have any interest in that, you can take this opportunity. Jennifer, and when you went to the supermarket and watched some TV here, could you share your position on that? What opinion do you have about the country when you went to the supermarket and watched some Russian TV?
Well, like I mentioned, I think I gave sort of an example of the TV was, showing caring, and I think that's, really, to me, I've seen that here. Yeah. But, and this, yes?
No.
And the supermarket, I'd say, has a lot of lovely things that I actually was allowed to eat on my plate served to me, and I didn't have to cook it, so I feel very privileged.
Спасибо. Я просто подумал, что
Thank you very much. What I thought is that you saw a group of people in the street helping each other, but not on TV. Tatiana, I would like to speak to you now. Let's give a round of applause to Jennifer for the answers and for the presentation. And Tatiana, for the last 5 years in Russia, all major events that have taken place here have their own volunteers program. It all started with the University Olympics, and then Tatiana was the head of the Olympics in Sochi, the head of volunteers programs in Sochi. And that was the start of all the infrastructure in volunteers program, and perhaps that was the first time when the highest public officials of Russia saw what volunteers programs can give and what infrastructure they need. And now it's difficult to find any events, major sports events, for example, in the country that do not have a volunteers program. But at the same time, there are those who think that volunteers events is not the voluntary movement that we should seek. We should more be engaged in various social volunteers programs. And I know some cities, for example, in the country where different authorities try to support individual volunteers, and they think that these are all different people doing different things, and that we have such programs. What's your opinion? Is it really true? Do we really have to distinguish between social volunteers programs and various event volunteers programs? So what is the situation in the world? Can you share your experience in that? Can you share your ideas about international trends? And do we have to do it in Russia as well? So, Artyom, thank you very much. This is the question that is not simple, but at the same time, it's simple. So I wouldn't distinguish anything, and I wouldn't say that we should pursue different paths, because all kinds of voluntary movements, both event and social movements, should come hand in hand. And I will give you an idea of mine about various mega events such as Olympics or Paralympics, and there are different proofs that we shouldn't distinguish between these movements. So the main thing is what FIFA or the International Olympic Committee are based on is the sustainable development of everything. So from the very start, when a project starts or any program is launched, the first thing we're thinking about is the positive, sustainable change that is going to take place in the country, thanks to this major event and thanks to the implementation of some volunteers program. This is exactly what we started with when we started working on the Olympics and Paralympics in Sochi and the volunteers program of the championship. But these two programs are really different, and the differences take place because we have come to a different stage of voluntary movement in the country. Just a couple of nuances here. In 2011, the voluntary movement in the country was not very well established, and it was difficult to find 25,000 motivated people, but it was the first thing that we thought about, and we started with creating infrastructure all across the country on the premises of various educational facilities, because we thought that of course, we were starting from scratch, but we were doing something that should be left in the future. And the main task of ours was to involve as many people as possible in our volunteers programs. So those people were supposed to participate in a major event, and then, following the event, they were supposed to continue their activities in various areas. It could be, for example, some event area or social area or cultural area or environmental area. The main thing is that the person should be motivated and very deeply involved in the activities. And this is one of the positive changes that takes place right after such major events. So you can see the infrastructure that was specifically built for the Olympics and Paralympics in Sochi. On the premises of these facilities, we created the Association of Volunteers Centers, and this is also a positive, sustainable change that took root after implementing the volunteers program of the Olympics and Paralympics. Of course, we have to develop various expertise and skills. We cannot ignore education and training. So we see that our volunteers are trained in a very efficient way. We have a big range of various educational programs for our volunteers, and this is also one more example of a sustainable positive change. When we adopted the concept of involving volunteers in the Olympics, we understood at once that it was not possible to do it locally. So what we had to do was to involve the whole country, because we also had to collaborate with foreign volunteers. This is some social movement, and we have to introduce these two nuances into our programs. But if we speak about the championship, the football championship, we have a very good trend here. There we have lots of infrastructure and motivated volunteers at once. And in the championship program, we try to reach out to local volunteers. This is a completely different infrastructure. Sochi is one city, and the championship of football encompasses 11 cities. And in the championship, we have 80% of local volunteers, and we did it from the very start in a very conscious way. We were thinking about the concept. We were thinking about the legacy we were going to leave to future volunteers, and we were thinking about all those people who would come to the championship and participate in this event. For example, in the Volgograd region or in the Saransk region, the volunteers centers are about 47 now. And if we speak about the volunteers program of the championship, then these are two avenues of development. The civic volunteers and the sports volunteers. So the championship that we're speaking about is the championship that our country will host next year in 2018. So could you tell us about this event and about the innovations the championship is going to employ? If we speak about these two avenues of development, so the civic or urban volunteers and the volunteers of the organizers committee, then it's a very huge project. This is one of the hugest projects in the world, and the overall audience will be 47.6% of the population of the world. So please raise your hands, those who love football, soccer. So that I love football personally, and we see many hands here raised, which means that lots of people really love football, and that's why it's one of the hugest world events. The volunteers program includes more than 30,000 people, and includes the civic volunteers, the urban volunteers, and the volunteers of the organizers committee. So we have about 177,000 of applications to become volunteers from 190 countries of the world. Speaking about these numbers, this is a record that we have broken in the history of football championships. Nobody has reached this figure before. And what surprised us was that 30% of the applications were from foreign volunteers. And that was also our historical record. If we compare the age of volunteers, and if we compare the Sochi program and the championship program, then the average age has not changed, and it's about 24 years old. But this is, again, quite different from the experience of other countries. For example, in Spain, it's about 33 years old. In London, it's about 35 years old. And in Vancouver, it's about 40 years old. So we understand that we're different. And we have some gender-specific things. Our average volunteer is a girl. But in Greece and in Spain, usually it's a male person. So we are really different in these terms, but football has worked a wonder. And if we speak about the percentages of male and female volunteers, then 60% of our candidates are girls and 40% are men, boys. So, in other words, I hope that our men has become more active than they were, and they have come to our volunteer movement, and it's really so. And those male people who are submitting their applications, they have some experience in voluntary activities already. 40% of all those people are also those who do not have any experience in voluntary activities. Is it good or bad? I think it's good, because it's some kind of precondition for some sustainable positive change. Our task is to make this 40% to stay with us, to retain them in this voluntary movement, and that's what we're doing and trying to achieve, because the volunteer centers of ours, they're trying to select people, and they're trying to organize some other events. And all those who are interested in voluntary activities, they're also invited to these other events. So, in other words, we try to engage our volunteers in all the aspects of our work. So I have said a couple of things about our infrastructure. We have 47 volunteer centers in 11 cities of the organizers. So, and the structure of the organizers committee includes only the higher educational establishments. So if we speak about the urban program of our volunteers, this is a different infrastructure. And now we are making everything possible to make our 47 volunteers centers stay in this area following the championship. And this is important to think about it in advance, not afterwards, when the program is completed already. If we speak about the educational program, the training program, then its main aim is to develop the skills of our volunteers. About 35,000 people are going to go through these training programs, and we are trying to teach them very specific practical skills, because our program includes about 20 avenues of activities. So these are, for example, volunteer interpreters, these are volunteer transporters and volunteer broadcasters who help the best broadcasting companies of the world. So, in other words, this training program is also a positive, sustainable change, because our main task is to develop the skills of our volunteers. And one more important thing that we have launched in the framework of this program is the contest of projects. And our volunteers can come up with their own ideas how to improve the life within their cities, in the organized 11 cities. And it has to do not only with sports or football, it has to do with tourism, with the environment, with the urban studies and development and so on. So just come to us, come to our program, join us. Together we are stronger and we can do lots of things. And we are going to speak about this today later with the Secretary General of FIFA and the Director General of the Organizational Committee of Russia for 2018. So
I wanted to show you the roadmap just for you to see that the matter of continuity is important. So we're talking about 2015. This is when the concept was developed, when we came up with it. So the problem of continuity was very important back then. This is how we tackled infrastructure issues. That was very important to us. Sometimes it seems that when speaking about continuity, we should be speaking about that at the end of the project. That's not the way it should be. Continuity is the first thing we should start with if we speak about the implementation of a volunteers program related to an important major event. It's not only about the programs related to volunteering. Anyway, continuity is important. We have to make sure that we learn certain lessons from what we do and that we continue doing what we do. Naturally, we will do a lot about what legacy will be left. The Sydney Olympic Games, I believe, is a prime example of a very good research efforts aimed at analyzing the changes brought about by that event. So the issue of continuity or legacy was very important back then. I wanted us to watch a video at the end of my presentation, a very short one, devoted to our foreign volunteers, which amount to 30% who are willing to come to Russia. So we speak about the record number of foreigners. We ask them why they wanted to come. We just want to know people. For us, the main reason to come is because I want to be a volunteer. I like to travel. And championship can give me an opportunity to get to know new people, their culture and traditions. I want to become a volunteer in Russia because I like football and sports in general. And I am asking myself a question if the red square is really red. I like football. I want to become a member of the volunteering program because I want to meet new people. I want to learn about something about new countries, about new cultures. And I believe the volunteering efforts can make the world better. I want to participate in the World Cup in 2018 because I love Russia. I like to help others. I like to learn something about people in other countries. I like to get new experience. I would like to volunteer in Russia because I like to communicate with people who have the same interest as I do. Russia, Russia, Russia. So this is the video recordings we received from our foreign volunteers. Many of them have already participated in our events. Some of them will only are just waiting to come to Russia. Great, thank you very much, Tatiana. Now I hope you can give us some tickets to football matches for us to be able to see the show. To all the panelists, don't forget about the panelists, they are all eager to see the tickets. While ticketing is a very sensitive issue, this is not something I'm going to discuss at the moment, to be frank. While indeed the event is going to be quite spectacular, I believe Russia will do its best to make sure everyone enjoys it, and I think volunteers will be an important part of those efforts. Thank you very much indeed. Now over to Pavel Savchuk. You are up next. You had the movement Doctors Volunteers. You deal with developing volunteering efforts in public health. This is quite new. You've been around for around 4 years, but you're quite vibrant. You're developing pretty fast. The question is as follows. There are certain barriers when it comes to volunteering. They can be found in any country. This can be explained to probably the history of volunteering efforts. Volunteering in Russia historically has always been here. It had different names. It was branded differently. We have used different ways of referring to volunteering efforts. Now, speaking about recent years, our state has been quite active in creating the necessary environment for volunteers in orphanages, in hospitals, trying to remove those barriers, but they still persist. Here in the audience, we have people who oftentimes go to hospitals as volunteers, or maybe volunteers from their organizations do that. So what kind of, well, for our foreign guests, this is something I would like to mention. What kind of barriers am I talking about here? Oftentimes, heads of hospitals or orphanages, for instance, nursery homes, they do not understand why volunteers are needed, and they consider them to be, say, an obstacle to what they're doing. They believe that volunteers that will break the existing rules. They're not used to seeing someone in the hospital. They're used to their daily routines, and when somebody comes new, they bring something new, they start changing that routine, they start monitoring the situation. This is an element of public control anyway, and some don't like that. Many heads of such organizations create obstacles for our volunteers, and if you have questions, go ahead with them, but let's first give a chance to Pavel to speak about the efforts to remove those barriers. You have 160 hospitals, if I'm not mistaken. 220 now, while I'm behind the times, indeed. So 220 hospitals, and I know people who can't get access to one hospital. What kind of solutions can you offer when it comes to interacting with hospitals, for instance, or organizations like this? Over 2 or 3 years, with one hospital, 4 years. You started with one, but over 4 years you increased the number of hospitals to 220. You cooperate with a huge number of doctors. You had a meeting with the health minister recently. How did it all happen? What is the technology? How can people present here in the audience use that experience for them to be able to develop their social projects of the sort, and maybe even take it to the international level? Thank you very much indeed. Good morning, everyone. I would like to start by saying that I've been doing this for a number of years, and I have always been sincerely delighted by volunteers. Someone stands up, breaks his daily routine and does something to help their fellow countrymen. That he's a real patriot indeed. I believe this is quite useful. As a doctor myself, I can say if you get up from your couch, you do something to prevent obesity, for instance. So volunteering is not only a social phenomenon as such, but it gives an impetus to development of civil society, but this is also an element of healthy lifestyles. So do engage in volunteering. Back to your question. That's a very complex question indeed. Probably one of the most complex questions when it comes UN volunteering program. These are something done by doctors or interpreters or rescue teams, and always the questions arise related to the legal framework, because volunteers, well, shouldn't be saying that, but sometimes they can be replacing people who are paid for that, which is not good. But we do not differentiate between such people. Volunteers sacrifice their free time. They can always forgo this idea and stop doing this. But if we speak about barriers, back to your question, we shouldn't be speaking about one barrier only. There are lots of them. The lack of understanding of the very activity itself, of why people need that. We are asked, why will you come to us? Public health, as well as the social welfare system. I believe public health is one of the most conservative areas, not because it is very well regulated and believe me, if something goes wrong with your health, you don't want to be lonely or to be in a room with 100 people at the same time who have come without the necessary equipment, or there should be some mechanism of controlling volunteers, but the general mechanism should be out there for any person to be able to engage in volunteering in in an organization he wants. And one of the most important principles to be observed, you should be rendering help where people need it. Don't try to impose your efforts if they are very well equipped, the medical staff is out there and it is sufficient, there are enough people. Don't do that. I'm sure there are hospitals in your cities that need your help, but you need to look for such hospitals that really need you. Knock on the door and the door will open, and then most of your problems will be resolved. Another important issue arises of the functionality of volunteers. It is clear that newcomers cannot do everything, and they're not allowed to do everything in a hospital, for instance. And addressing such questions is important, and this is something to be done at the level of the state and relevant ministries engaged with issues like this. It's important to set up a legal framework, federal law, for instance, that is being drafted by the Ministry of Health of the Russian Federation related to medical volunteering and boards of trustees in medical organizations. What I like about our public health system and why I'm doing all this is that it's becoming more open to people. This is very important. Public health system, welfare system should be open to people because they are created for people after all. And volunteering here is very similar to volunteering as such. Volunteering is set up by people and for people. That's what we all of us do here. And if we speak about the federal level, which there should be a federal law, there should be a relevant federal center dealing with volunteers, and the Public Health Ministry has set up such a center, the first center of the kind that will be supporting volunteers in public health protection. It will be monitoring the efforts, will be providing certain trainings, and of course will be addressing legal issues if they arise. Let's not forget that apart from federal laws, why are you talking about federal laws, some may ask? We're not in the State Duma here, but we should be also aware of the regional level, regional laws. There can be laws adopted at the local or regional laws. A certain organization can issue a decree that can introduce a mechanism allowing volunteers. or maybe a certain provisions in a charter that would provide for who is allowed to come in, what volunteers are allowed to do. We have good examples in such regional examples. The Krasnoyarsk Krai, Moscow, where regional authorities do understand the importance and effect of volunteering, and this impact is great. When I start thinking about the disadvantages of volunteering, I can't come up with any. If someone can come up with any disadvantages of volunteering effort, do tell me. Regional authorities are quite conservative, and it was right in saying that they are afraid of new, energetic people. They will be smiling, which is quite awful for a hospital. That's what some of them may think. But why do we need volunteers? We understand that we're speaking about the emotional impact that helps us to produce certain hormones in our body. Such hormones are important for us. They help us protect our blood vessels, for instance. So those efforts that bring us good hormones is very good for us itself. So we are aware of at least 2 medical advantages of engaging in volunteering. Do remember that. So I'm not going to turn my presentation into a medical lecture, of course. So again, continuing to answer your question. We have what we call public health system. What does it mean? It's clear from the very name itself. The health of the nation, of the state, cannot be established without the efforts of people, the efforts of the public. And if any sphere wants to be effective, for instance, social, medical, it cannot be possible without a constructive dialogue and constructive engagement with the public. How do we set up a major Russian organization at the federal level? Probably, to be frank, there is no secret. There is no silver bullet to all the problems, indeed. We just do what we do. Don't dream of something big. Do your job, love what you are doing, and then you will succeed. If I may, I need a remote control to control the presentation. The clicker, we have 95 slides ahead. I will try to be very brief and probably fast. Just key issues. I will skip most of the slides. My apologies for that. Let me speak about infrastructure. What have we set up and what helps us to develop volunteering? This is a roadmap for developing volunteering that includes all the people in charge, all the deadlines, the functions, social effects we are planning, and what is to be done. We are to do a lot, to be frank. The roadmap was supported by the relevant ministry. It was supported at the regional level as well, which is a key to our success indeed. And what is most important, this infrastructure, this roadmap is very important at the local level. This is something that will facilitate volunteering. As far as the role of volunteers in the health system, it's huge. One cannot just describe it briefly. My colleagues with the relevant organizations took stock of all those effects. We have 9 major areas, and we have 53 types of volunteering efforts in the health system. Just think of it, 53 types of activities. Maybe there are areas which enjoy more types of volunteering efforts, but I think that's a great number. Some of them are summarized here. What kind of help can be rendered by volunteers? It's reflected in the slide. Our apologies, we cannot reproduce the contents of the slide. And now the results. We contributed 900,000 hours to helping people. 2,000 trainings have been conducted. These applauses go to our volunteers and regional coordinators who are here. 2,000, once again, trainings, and we work with over 200 medical organizations. And let me give just one example of what we do. Do we have any time left? Just a little bit. Okay. Just one example of what we can do to our public health system. We are all aware of the stroke. This is a very severe disease that changes blood circulation in your brain, that may lead to irreversible changes in the brain vessels. You are to render help within 35 minutes. If a person does not receive this as assistance, this help, then you can say goodbye to such a citizen. The person will become disabled. So we are to raise people's awareness of the symptoms. We launched a program, Children Protecting Adults. We want to involve 30,000 people of 80 cities. We want to tell them how to identify stroke, for them to be able to see those symptoms in their grandmothers. Some may say 30,000 is not enough for a country like this, but good things start with small efforts, which can later transform into major campaigns. So these are our contacts in case you need them. Just believe in what you're doing. If you believe in yourselves and if you believe in your efforts, it doesn't matter how many volunteers your team has. 9,000, 150,000, or just 5 people. What's important is the strength of your belief. Good luck to all of you. Thank you very much indeed, Ole Christian Madsen, the president. Make a Difference Denmark. This is a key organization of the sort in Denmark, as I understand. Christian, I know that Dania is one of the countries with the best social welfare system. Denmark, if you take care of individuals at such a high level, what do volunteers do if Denmark is such a prosperous country? So what do volunteers do in your country?
Sorry, I don't want to hear myself. Well, they do a lot of the same thing as they do here, I guess. But it's an important part of democracy. It's also an important part of learning, and I think that we do have a lot, actually, of volunteers in Denmark. I just want to say that I work as a volunteer in Make a Difference Denmark, and I do have another job also, working for the government in Denmark. But I would first of all like to thank all here. It's a privilege to be invited, and so thank you. And I'm very glad to be here. The last time I was here was actually back in 1992. I traveled around the world at that time. I came from Hong Kong, Macau, which was Portuguese and British at that time. Traveled through China, a very different China, and into eastern part of Russia, and the whole way through Russia to the west of Russia. And it was a very different world from now, I'll say. I traveled some years around the world in that time, and I saw a lot of things in the world and how different people were. I learned from what I saw, what I tasted, smelled, felt, and most importantly, the people I met. And no university could have taught me what I learned on my journey around the world. But it also shaped me as a human being, as an understanding for different cultures, religion, and other things. For me, this is exactly what volunteering can do. I believe volunteering can help shape people based on who they are and the interest they have, because you only volunteers because you want to be there, not because you have to be there. The fact that you spend time on something that interests you, learning something while helping others, is helpful for yourself, but it's also to the society, and not least those people you may help. In most of the world, we have an opportunity for education, but even all the very good education opportunities where formal education takes place doesn't learn you everything, and maybe not the most important things in life. Think about how did you learn to walk or talk? Well, it's called mother's tongue, isn't it? The language you speak. And where did you learn about love, friendship, good sex, all important things? In the same way, with this fantastic conference with people from all over the world, many would go home with some good presentations in their back. But if you haven't used the breaks, the evenings, or maybe the nights to meet other interesting people, you haven't gained full value. For many years, I've been working for the Danish government as a special consultant, it's called, in the civic society with focus for volunteering involvement and working on national Danish civic society strategies. Might sound boring. In Denmark, all parties in parliament care for the volunteering sectors and agrees on the fact that volunteering sectors should be treated as an independent and equal partners. And the sector is an important part of the democracy, active citizen and learning. That is official. Still, some politicians also see the sector as an opportunity to make a smaller public sector, save money on public welfare system, and I think that's more unofficial. But overall, positive attitude gives consensus and opportunities for long-term planning and an easy job for me. But we're always interested to see what can be done to improve the area and also get more young people to join, just like you. We have done a lot of survey and research on volunteering work, and I have in the presentation some of it there, but as you say, well, we shouldn't have figures in here, so I've passed them. But our conclusion after years of study was that young people, if we want young people to become volunteers, then they must be inspired to try it. And I think we've heard a lot of good examples here. A lot of them will experience the power of volunteering and to reach their full potential and continue being volunteering. So just do it. I think that my time is gone, isn't it? Almost. But I just want to show a short video of an example, and it's just an example of how to recruit more volunteers. And I can tell you this example, it's a private one with a good friend of mine, Stephen Green, that's behind it. But it have actually recruited more volunteers than a lot of very expensive national initiatives we have had in Denmark. And it's called Rock Corps. And the idea is that you give 4 hours volunteering, and then you get a concert tickets. And I don't know if, yeah. And the thing is that more than 50% of those who gets to the concert actually continues afterwards being volunteer. And now I don't know how to start the video, but I've just tried to, well, I put this one in here because I learned that Russia is actually 400 times bigger than Denmark. So, it should be there, but I have to press this one in the button there. Maybe it doesn't come.
Включите ролик, пожалуйста.
But while we wait, I can just sort of answer your questions about that, as I said, that we do think democracy is a... Oh, here we go.
Music lovers are being encouraged to give 4 hours of time and effort.
Thousands of free tickets for a Busta Rhymes concert at the Albert Hall are being handed out to young people.
It seems almost too good to be true. A moderate success so far.
4 hours, 1 ticket.
We are live from London's Royal Albert Hall.
Cheers to you guys. Thank you so much for everything that you've done.
J'ai trouvé que le gel était super, mais vraiment super.
It makes volunteer work
a bit fashionable.
Volunteering gives you a certain feeling.
4 hours of your time, well done you.
I just want to make you scream.
La motivación que me trajo a venir acá es contribuir con un granito de arena con la sociedad.
I'm going involved because I love the artists, obviously the concert, and just wanted to give back and help the community a little.
It's amazing to do something good for other people.
We want to eventually go all over the world because our philosophy is that, you know, through music and through one kid at a time, we can change the world.
Best thing I've ever done, ever.
Such an amazing concert, 4 hours for such an amazing concert. I was proud.
I'm too much excited, I can't say anything.
Some people can afford the tickets even if they were on sale. It gives people the chance to get the ticket no matter what. They can put something in to get something back.
My 4 hours couldn't even compare to what just happened here. Thank you.
Orange Rock Core is the coolest thing you can ever do in your life. Come back next year and do it again.
Это очень хорошая идея.
This is really a good idea. Is that it?
I have some more, but so well, we had to shorten it a little bit down. So.
Спасибо огромное, что показали.
Thank you very much for showing us this video, because this is quite a topical idea for Russia. We have conducted a joint survey with the hugest opinion poll agency of Russia, and we have some information from them that following this survey that there are many more people who would like to be engaged in voluntary work than we have at the moment, and now we are looking for different mechanisms that could stimulate lots of people to come to voluntary activities, not in terms of numbers perhaps, but first of all in terms of quality. So guys, what do you think if we, for example, give you rock tickets to rock concerts in Russia? Could it be a good idea for you? Christian, a question to you. So how do you contact, how do you reach out to any individual celebrity, rock star? So do you do it on some individual level, or is there some centralized body that organizes such things?
Rock Corps is not my idea, and it's some guys from the States that started it, and I think they've been in 38 different countries around the world now, and the idea is actually that you guys are very important for companies. They want advertising. So most of the time, the way the concept is it's actually paid. The concert is paid for from some companies, and then they make different social projects, local community projects, which is where you can really see a change. That gives some publicity, but it also gives all the young people some opportunities to see that when you go together, you can actually lift something. So it works both ways. And for me, volunteering is not it's not something that don't have to collaborate with companies, with national level or local communities. I think that we all have to work together, and that what makes it great.
Супер. Спасибо огромное.
Thank you very much. We have time just for a couple of questions, not more. Be very brief. And now I cannot hear the person. Please introduce yourselves. Give another mic because it's not working. Introduce yourself. My name is Irina. I'm from Moscow. I have 2 questions. Let us come down to one question. So, okay, it is easy to engage young people in voluntary activities. What is more difficult is to engage adult colleagues with families and various obligations. And for me, as a volunteer leader, the main challenge in the company where I'm working is to engage my colleagues, fellow workers that do not have enough free time to contribute this time to voluntary activities. Do you have any practical tips how we can engage more adults into voluntary activities and to make them more confident? You know, it's a better question for a different section of our discussion where different corporate activities are being discussed at the moment. But okay, but let us discuss this question. If we speak about, okay, not senior citizens, but citizens in their 30s, 40s, and so on. So who is going to take this question to answer this? Perhaps it's more to Tatiana, but Jennifer seems to have an answer as well. Thank you very much. This is a very good question. When we started working on the program of involvement, we knew that our average volunteer is rather young, and more senior people are not involved in the movement. In our major events, it's easier for us to engage some more adult people, and we have managed to do that. We have worked with various corporate structures, and we have achieved the result that we wanted, and we hoped that this result would contribute to a bigger number of adults among our volunteers, and in November we'll give you exact numbers when we have completed our selection. So you know, it's just Jennifer, please.
To add, corporate social responsibility, I think, is really the key. So getting those companies, the businesses themselves, to be involved and wanting to actually promote volunteerism in their workforce. And we've seen that in our partnerships at the United Nations Volunteers, but I've seen that also in many different countries outside of that cooperation as well. Online volunteering, UN online volunteering, we actually do have platforms that we're working with companies, and it gives them an opportunity to offer something to their workforce that is something unique, that also might give them something different, something outside of the work day. And I just wanted to touch upon what Pavla talked about is well-being. I think that you know, the medical benefits of volunteering are definitely getting off the couch. That's good. But it's also mental health. There have been a lot of studies, and the reality is that if you are a volunteer, you actually are not just giving to others, but you're giving to yourself. And so you're becoming a healthier person. And I think that companies and businesses are starting to realize that. So I think it's a win-win situation.
Thank you very much. On the 19th of October, in Hall 11.3, we will be speaking about corporate responsibility as the DNA of a new business. Well, we're going to speak with various international corporations such as Philip Morris, KFC, and others. So you can participate in this discussion if you're interested in the question. One more question, a second one.
All the panelists and the participants from various countries here. My question is to Jennifer from UN Volunteers. Ma'am, you talked about removing the barriers for volunteerism and for young people to volunteer in various projects. So I wish to ask a question about the policy of UN Volunteers, which says that the UN Volunteers does not provide for accommodation of volunteers, or they do not provide for travel expenses or the food and lodging of the volunteers. So this acts as a huge hindrance for young people to volunteer in UN volunteer projects. So how is your organization trying to remove these barriers for young people? We have Abdul Rahman from ISEC, which I have been in touch with a lot of volunteers who volunteered for different ISEC projects, and they have at least been given accommodation or lodging facilities. But as far as UN projects are concerned and young people volunteering for these projects, we've seen that this has acted as a barrier for young people to actually volunteer for UN projects. So what is your organization trying to do to remove these barriers?
Okay, thank you for the... We actually have quite a very, very strong framework for supporting volunteers. So I'm not really sure where your information came from, because all UN volunteers are within the framework of the United Nations. So first and foremost is security. So they have the same security benefits when they go abroad. I'm talking about international volunteers that a UN staff member would have. So it's absolutely of the top, utmost security. Then we also have volunteer allowances for all volunteers. We have international UN volunteers and national UN volunteers, which covers basically not only living allowance, but their whole livelihood while they're volunteering. So we definitely do not have barriers in that case.
Спасибо огромное.
Thank you very much. And I think it's going to be the final question. So, and I would like to ask a question myself. So we've been speaking about the future in this festival. There is a business program of this festival that is fully dedicated to the ideas of the future, what is going to happen in 2030, how different the civil society is going to be, and so on, and how voluntary activities are going to change. So, and I would like you to share your ideas. What is your idea of the change in the future based on technologies, innovations, the changes in culture, in education, and so on? So what is the concept of voluntary activities of the future? So, and what should we do right now to prevent bad things and to improve good things? So, Jennifer, Tatiana, and all the others, so you can choose who's going to start. Who's going to be the first?
I'm closest to you, Sebastian. Volunteering for the future. I think online volunteering is going to skyrocket. I am also really impressed with a lot of technologies that bring the network together, so the supply and the demand. And I just heard about this morning from my colleague about the volunteer passport that the Association for Volunteer Centers have, for example. So that, and also Tatiana talked about that. So that when you become part of a network, when you actually have a volunteer assignment, that this is really a catalyst effect. So you become part of a network and a group, and that through social media, through social networks, you can immediately tag on to a project, whether it's just in real time on that very day in the area where you are, or if it's with longer term experiences. To me, that's really the future, is combining technology and volunteering.
Спасибо. Thank you.
Cool. So when you come to think of it, at this moment of digital disruption, a lot of our day-to-day jobs, or a lot of the normal things that we usually do, are being replaced by machines, computers, programs, algorithm, etc. But there are a couple of things that, whether it's 2030, 2060, 2100, will always be unique for a human being. And I see the exact same thing in volunteerism. So I see the volunteer of the future towards 2030 are people that are capable of embracing their creativity in terms of solving problems, in terms of bringing actual social impact, and at the same time have the capacity of empathy. Two key things that can never be replaced by a machine. creative genius of a human being and empathy. So how can we constantly, as a generation, understand that this is our unique added value? If I want to compete one day with a bot or with an artificial intelligence or with the Terminator that's going to be creating the next Armageddon or whatever, how can I compete from that place of empathy and creative genius? Because then, adding on to what Jennifer was saying, there's going to be a lot of digital platforms. There's going to be a lot of different community-based solutions, such as what Tatiana was talking about. But how can we bring that to the table continuously? So that would be it. Yeah. Thank you.
I fully agree with what my colleagues have just said. I do believe that we're now living in this modern world of technologies and many things are being replaced, but I am convinced that thanks to IT technologies, volunteers will increase in number, but at the same time, volunteers will have a certain emotional element. This face-to-face communication is what will matter. This role will be reserved for volunteers. IT technologies cannot replace everything. Having listened to a lecture by one of our best neuroscientists, I understood that volunteers have a lot to do even in the future. I believe that volunteering will be accessible to each and everyone. It will be borderless. Thanks to UN Volunteers Program, we have erased many borders now, but probably by 2013, volunteers will have their own passports. They won't have any visas to cross borders. They will be able to engage in volunteering activities there. We will have volunteers in the Antarctic, in the outer space, for sure.
It's pretty hard to compete with space, but anyway, I think that civic society have always been managed to cope with every situation. They're actually the one, if you look at volunteering, if you look in one country, if they haven't got any education system, the volunteer would take over. If they don't have any health care, they would take over. They've always done, all the welfare system, as you talk about in Denmark, is invented by the volunteers or the NGOs and the civic society, and then the government have taken over afterwards. But it's always started that way, and I think that would continue.
Супер. Друзья, но я думаю...
Great. Taking stock of our discussion, I should like to say that volunteering efforts is a magic story, a story of success that helps us to develop ourselves, develop our societies and countries and the world as a whole. This is indeed a tool that helps us address lots of complex problems and reach new highs. And as Pavel has rightly mentioned, it's good for your health and brings you a feeling of happiness. And those of you who attended the opening ceremony of our World Festival could probably see that those social innovations that were demonstrated by guests, visitors from other countries, many of those participated in our discussions on this platform. So that's the future. The festival is all about our future, and I personally believe that volunteers, as responsible people, will command the future. Volunteers are the partners for their countries. The more partners of this sort we have, the more comfortable our lives will be in the future in our societies, the more happier people will be. So we're doing a great job. Let's applaud to ourselves. Let's give a round of applause to our panelists. So thank you very much indeed. The discussion is over. We'd like to thank you all. Thank you.